What is happening, good people? I am here to record Macro Dirt Podcast number 46, the Andy Pettit Podcast. My partner in crime is away on a writing sabbatical, but I landed a whale for this bad boy because the show must go on. The founder of Global Macro Investor, the founder of Real Vision, and my friend with the best smile in finance, Mr. Raoul Pal. How are you, brother?
Tony, it's always fantastic to see you. Makes my day.
It really does. I'm so thrilled that you could take the time from your busy schedule and your travels to talk to me about markets today, because I have so much respect for, your history, your pedigree, and your voice out there. So I'm dying to hear what you have to say about a lot of stuff. To start, our professional overlap, Raoul, came when we both worked at Goldman Sachs. Right. I know we learned what just give me like some shades of your reflections from working there. We worked there roughly at the same time, right? In the late 90s, give or take. And what did you think about working there at the time? What was it like? And did you like it?
I loved it and hated it. I loved it because you were surrounded by the smartest people in the world and you were at the epicenter of everything. I mean, there was nowhere like Goldman Sachs in the late 90s, early 2000s. I hated it because it was really restrictive, because it was Goldman Sachs. It was basically a cult, and you had to fit into the cult. And if you didn't, you get spat out the other side. But that whole period was amazing because I was there for the Asian crisis. I was there for the IPO of Goldman. I was there for the Asian crisis. I was there for the start of the recession in 2000, 2001. The dot-com bubble, the whole thing. It was an unbelievable time to be in markets. You were there at the same time. There was everything going on, and we had the ringside seat right at the front watching everything.
Yeah, that was the thing that stood out to me, was that, you got on that desk and you were like, whoa, there goes the Soros fund trading that. There goes Steve Cohen buying some of that. There goes Paul Tudor Jones. Holy smokes. What I loved about it was the intensity, and what I hated about it was the intensity, because you'd get to the end of a 5-day week and your brain would be utterly fried.
I can't express what that brings back to me as memories. Firstly, I just remember going out for dinner on a Friday night with friends and I couldn't speak. I had like a rash on my face. I was a total wreck. It was the Asian crisis that really killed it for me. It was so bad. We were understaffed, because I'd built that hedge fund business and we hadn't hired enough people. And it was so busy. I had 42 telephone lines in front of me with everybody screaming and shouting, Soros, Tiger, Tudor, more capital, that I couldn't even go for a piss during the day. It was horrific. It was so intense.
Or how about, God forbid, you had to take a number 2 and they came into the bathroom to get you?
Oh, yeah.
That was
and
unpleasant.
You're on 2 phones and there's people shouting, saying, you've got Paul Tudor Jones on line 3. I'm like, I can't take him. And he's like, he's shouting at me. Or, God forbid, Steve Okin.
Right? Oh,
do you remember Steve Okin from Soros?
Yes. Yeah. You ran if that guy was on the phone, man. I mean, I never spoke to him personally, but the guys, the salespeople on our metals desk sure did.
Yeah.
Good God, man. That is great memories, Raoul. But, the one thing that I always have to mention is that I learned everything that I know about the rigor of risk management within those walls.
Also, the rigor of professionalism.
Yeah.
We can all be who we are, but they teach you something, which is how to be a professional. And you're up against the smartest people in the world. Certainly at the time, it was the epicenter of, anybody who had a PhD in anything was working at Goldman. And there was me out of Plymouth Polytechnic in the UK with, a pretty crappy education, having to go against these people. It kept you on your toes, but also just the level of professionalism was incredible.
Yeah, it was truly a mental melting pot, right?
Yeah.
Of different brains from all over the world. And what the good part was that they needed ham and eggers, like I considered myself. They needed guys that could just be in the trenches and get away from every day and survive. And so I'm glad that I got that opportunity there. So since we learned everything we know about rigor and professionalism from there, Raoul, let's start in your backyard in the crypto space. Just to tee it up, I mean, I got back into crypto. I'm long again from a couple of weeks ago because, quite honestly, I was astounded at the price action and the way that it held in during that Liberation Thursday de-risking event that we had. And man, something that doesn't go down when it's supposed to is sure a good buy. And that's the way I've been looking at the world. What are your broad brush thoughts on Bitcoin for starters? And then we'll get into some more intense questions.
So, what I've done is built that framework of how crypto is just a macro asset. And it took a long time for people to believe that. They thought it's something different, it's something unique. It's a macro asset. So you apply the same things that I've always used, which is liquidity, business cycle, all that stuff, plus a bit of technicals and sentiment. There's no voodoo here. It's pretty straightforward as an asset. It's just more volatile. So it's harder to deal with. But you were right. What I was seeing was like the liquidity indicators like Global M2 had stabilized and started going up. It leads Bitcoin. Bitcoin was following it almost perfectly. So I was starting to look for the bottom. Then I start looking at stuff like, okay, where's sentiment on NASDAQ? Because it's tech stock, same thing. It was in the gutter.
Right.
Sentiment was the worst I had seen since COVID. And that was across the board, across everything. Even hedge fund long short, everybody was max bearish. And I'm looking at liquidity. It's going up. I'm seeing the market getting fearful over a narrative. And I'm like, well, what is the likely outcome here? Are they going to have 150%, a trillion percent tariffs on China? No, they're going to reach something normal. So you've gone from peak headline fear to things could only be better from here. So for me, it was like a no-brainer of an opportunity, both in tech stocks and in crypto. And so going forwards now, normally speaking, this is the period, my framework is about, them rolling the debt and having to provide liquidity to do so. And so what we've got is a lot of forward-looking liquidity coming out of whether it's the weakness of the dollar, whether it's other countries using their balance sheets, a number of different mechanisms. And all of that to me is suggesting that the rest of this year is going to be very strong. And I was kind of thinking the NASDAQ was going to be a V-shaped recovery. And my God, it was a V-shaped recovery. And people are still underweight and short. It's a hell of a setup.
That's the one thing that you recognize, right, Raoul, with a lot of years of experience, is that now everybody's got to buy the U.S. equity market back, and they haven't, right?
Retail got it.
Exactly. We are back to S&P 5900, and everybody's pulling their empty pockets out like rabbit ears in terms of U.S. equities because they ain't got none. So,
and I tell you what you'd enjoy is we overlaid the chart of 1997. The Asian crisis was a short, sharp shock versus now it's almost identical. The kind of the 4 month period leading up to it, 4 or 5 months leading up to it. And that was a V-shaped recovery as well, because everybody was caught off sides because they thought the world was going to end. Liquidity came into the system. It was via the Fed that time cutting rates and all the other central banks. And the market just went up in a straight line for the next 2 years.
Man, if it doesn't feel like you've got to price in some probability of that happening right now, I don't know anything, because there is some probability. Like I was just talking with a few other professionals, and there are a lot of people that are looking at this like, oh, this rally has gotten stupid. And then there are professionals that are looking at it like, no, this is day one of restocking US equities, day one. And if it is, you got to kind of play that carefully. And in my book, on technicals, we're going blue sky now in the S&P, where it recovers all the major moving averages. And for me, the next target is the old high. So we'll see.
It feels that way to me. And I think you're right. There is a risk here that we rerun 98, 99 or 99 because you've just taken all the tail risk. Let's assume that Saudi, the US, and Israel do a deal with Iran. That feels like it's going to happen. Let's say that there will be a ceasefire in Ukraine, and let's assume that the Chinese will come to the table, do something reasonable. Those three things happen. We've taken all of the left tail off the table. And people are going to be like, oh, but inflation's going to come back. And they're going to keep saying that for 18 months, which they kept saying as inflation's fall. So I think it is not a small probability that we have a really blow off kind of next 9 months or so.
I agree. And people forget that the stock market doesn't mind the battle between inflation, stagflation, deflation, right? When it's a battle and we're somewhere in the middle and we're not redlined to one side, stock market looks at that and says, we're cool. right? As long as rates aren't flying higher off the handle, the stock market can go on business as usual. And that's where you see trends resume and individual trades
Yeah, I mean,
developing.
the last Trump cycle in 2017, we had the same thing. The market corrected in the beginning because everyone's fearing tariffs and the same narrative. The Fed were raising rates and doing balance sheet runoff. And the market screamed higher all year because the Chinese were stimulating, the Europeans had to stimulate. So it feels like, even if the Fed don't do anything, I still think the Fed cut, but let's assume they don't. Well, that's not a prerequisite for the market to do anything. As you said, as long as rates aren't jacking higher, everything's fine.
Totally. What are now I want to ask you about I want to kind of just go back to a Bitcoin question here, because obviously we like the price action. We like what it's done. In the back of my mind, I still have that it formed the all-time high while President Trump was being sworn in, right? Our first super crypto-friendly president creates the position of AI and crypto czar, hires David Sachs to fill it. Do you think that he's going to have a material effect on the price of Bitcoin, or is this a sideshow?
No, it's real. And I'll tell you why it's real. I've just come back from the Middle East. All of the sovereign wealth funds are now buying. Right, these are the largest pools of capital in the world. We're hearing it out of Saudi, out of Abu Dhabi, out of Qatar, and out of Bahrain. And why that's happening is because the US has become crypto friendly. It's the green light. So the US will get some regulation through. There'll be a bit of a shit show and debating about it and the usual stuff, but they will get some regulation through, which is the clarity that all of the pension funds need. So they're waiting as well. So there is a lot of buying to come from the really big players who've been waiting. Like Goldman has not been able to fully build out its desk, and JP Morgan haven't. They've had crypto for a while, but only for certain types of customers. But they want to build out suites of product, but they've been waiting for regulatory clarity. So, yeah, I think it's a big deal, actually. I really do. So
the reason I agree, Raoul, to jump in here, because you addressed something, you addressed the reason that converted me to a crypto bull from being really just watching it, from being a spectator. And that was seeing the unbelievable ETF inflows, both when Bitcoin goes up and when Bitcoin goes down. And when you notice that there are days that Bitcoin doesn't do much and there is $900 million of inflow to the IBIT ETF, you're saying to yourself, somebody with an agenda is buying this. This is not a one day, let's put the position on and walk kind of thing. There is a new entity in this market that has decided that there is merit in this asset class and they've got funds to go for it. So that's one of the things that kept McGee in this and wanting to be in it, is just the unbelievable inflow. What are the conversations on the other side, Raoul? What are the clients thinking? Are they thinking the same thing as us? Like, we've just got a macro asset here that we can be supportive of. The U.S. is going to be supportive of. Let's get in it. Or is there any other agenda on the institutional side?
The institutions are still either trying to figure out what this thing is.
Yeah.
Right? I had a conversation with one of the biggest kind of financial asset management firms in the world yesterday, based out of the US. And they're like, they've even got a crypto division, but they're other kind of where they allocate the assets. They're like, we don't know how to deal with this. So they're still trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Like, they haven't figured out it's a macro asset. Others have. The sovereign wealth funds obviously are just doing it for diversification of reserves. They're like, it's a technology, it's a diversification of reserves. So if the US is going to do it, we're going to do it. So there's different groups doing different stuff. There is a bunch of people who still don't really want to do the homework on it. They're like, we don't know, it's too volatile for us. But I think usually it's the first mover advantage in this. And, again, it reminds me a lot of back in the day when Goldman rolled out the GSCI index and nobody had commodities in their portfolios, and that team had to go around and sell commodities to everybody.
Right. Look, guys, it's backwardation. It works like this. You roll into a cheaper contract and you generate profit from that, right? Like they
And
had to
they would
understand
say,
that.
the clients would say, but it's too volatile. And you say, yes,
Yeah,
but
right.
part of a diversified portfolio, it's exactly the same thing, right?
That's right. That's
It's
right.
exactly, and also, we were around when the gold ETF started, and it's the same thing. Everyone was like, "Holy shit, where did this come from?" It became a very, very big ETF. It's
Yeah.
exactly the same. What people like to do, because there's so many new participants in the industry, they think it's all new and different. When you've been around as long as you and I, you realize nothing is different. We've gone through all of this before. This just happens to be a bigger, faster moving asset, but it's the same as GSCI was. It's the same as the gold ETF was. It's the same as the Nasdaq was when we didn't understand what the fuck it was and why it went up all the time. It's all of these things combined, right?
Totally brilliant, Raoul. Totally brilliant. I have a question for you. Let's talk about the other stores of value that seem to be, gold has been an unbelievable performer this year. GDX, the gold miners are the number one performing sector of the stock market, for fuck's sakes, which is like an anomaly. We just traded a high of 3,500 and now we've got a double top around there. What do you think about gold here, Raoul?
So I came up with something. It was only last month in Global Macro Investor that kind of shocked me. Hadn't figured out is that there is a set of dominoes that happen in markets. Financial conditions lead everything. For financial conditions, we use the dollar, rates, and oil, right? The three big financial conditions thing. What we found is that leads like the ISM and other stuff by about 9 months. And it leads liquidity by about 6 months, something like that. Liquidity is what drives Bitcoin and NASDAQ, and it leads it by 3 months. So global M2, let's say, leads Bitcoin by about 3 months. I found out, I was like, what's going on with gold? I put it against against financial conditions. It reacts in real time to financial conditions.
Wow.
I'm like, holy shit, why didn't I figure this out before?
Of all trading securities, right?
Of all the things, well, because it's a pure currency asset, right? It's the pure thing. And so the moment financial conditions ease, gold moves. And so it's leading everything else, which is, we were kind of thinking, is it leading or is it doing something weird? Is it trying to price in some catastrophic risk? No, it was just pricing in the fall in the dollar, the fall, rates didn't really fall a great deal, but the fall in oil.
And I'd throw on, the visible death of fiat currency as, Western nations drive their deficits and their borrowing levels to absurdity. It seems like that's something gold was reacting to on the way up, right?
Well, that's what the financial conditions are in the end.
Yeah.
It's the debasement of currency. It's the whole thing is the debasement of currency by excess liquidity being pumped into markets by any mechanism possible. At first, they used the balance sheet. Then we all figured that out and called that money printing. So then they did this Fed net liquidity trick, which was the balance sheet plus the Treasury General account and the reverse repo. Yeah. Then we figured that out. And then they moved to total global liquidity, which is including M2, which is stuff it on the bank's balance sheets. So force the banks to buy bonds. That's the game.
Right. And now we're all disciples of Michael Howell so that we can become experts on when the liquidity is getting turned on and off, right?
Exactly.
Got it. It doesn't take us too many tricks to figure that one trick out, right?
Exactly. And once you know that it's always going to be a trick, you just keep your mind open to what the next trick is.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds you that there's nothing new under the sun and that they just changed decks.
That's right. So the next thing we'll hear at some point is like they'll say insurance company balance sheets are too stressed or something, and they need to, by regulatory standards, buy more bonds. Whatever it is, the answer is somebody needs to buy the bonds, and they will force liquidity into the system to buy the bonds. That's the game.
Yeah, it really is. And then just while you just mentioned bonds, what are your thoughts right around now in the bond market, right? I've been a little bit taken aback by the sell-off, right? Yields are a bit higher. To me, that came with a little bit of the tariff rollout losing its credibility, right? We've definitely seen the correction of a policy error. right? Like that they tried to handle that adeptly. It got out of hand, and then I think that they kind of sent Scott Bessent in to kind of fix things up as best he could with some VIX melting statements. Um, I guess what I'm asking is,
You're asking me about bonds, and
yes, go
I
ahead. Tell me what
used
you
to
think of bonds
be
here.
I used to be really good at bonds.
Yeah,
I'm
you're the best in the
fucking
market. Period.
I'm fucking atrocious at them now. I don't understand bonds anymore because they're not working according to the business cycle. They're not working according to the oil price. They're not working according to inflation. And it's not like that all of the auctions are failing. So it's not like it's a lack of buyers. So I don't really understand what is going on. It feels to me that liquidity is not in the bond market and they need to do this SLR thing, which is basically allowing the primary dealers to warehouse more bonds.
Right.
So it needs, I think it's a liquidity issue, a plumbing issue, because, I mean, they should be much lower. Look at inflation came out this morning, 2.3%.
Exactly.
Yet 2-year yields are like almost 4%. It's like, this
Yeah.
is stupid.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad because I'm not the only confused bond trader in the room, and I can call you. You are a dyed in the cast trader when you go from being like my most respected source in bonds to admitting yourself that you've got no fucking idea what's going on anymore. That's what traders do and how they behave. And don't tell me you haven't had a dollar of risk in the bond market since you couldn't figure out what's going on.
Yeah, no, I've had a few swings at it and then I've given up. I've just given up.
There it is. Yeah, there it is. That's the true trader talking, man. I totally understand that. I'm in touch with that, and I just had to hear your thoughts because I have no idea what's going on in the bond market. I usually use it as a speedometer for my equity trades, and right now the bond market isn't telling me to be balls long equity, but the equity market is.
That's right. And it's kind of like, are we having to ignore bonds here? Which is a weird thing for us because we used to always check what bonds were doing to figure out whatever all other assets were doing. And I'm actually just focused using the dollar instead as like our key indicator because that seems to be a better measure than bonds are right now.
I agree. Until we get through this period that feels like some kind of financial engineering in the bond market, I think we got to kind of at least put a little bit of a noise cancellation policy on it. All right, so we're going to miss this stock rally.
And that's what a lot of people have done, right? They've missed it because they're like, well, bonds, and they create some narrative and they've been out of the market.
Well, look what happened. Remember Liberation Thursday, Raoul? That's when bonds came in and got dunked and the whole market got destroyed. And you're saying to yourself as a trader, oh my God, if they come after the treasury market, we're all going to die. You know what I mean? Just because that's the setup. That's what the setup was a month ago.
But there again, Besant and a few others came out immediately and said, oh, we've got tools to deal with the bond market. And they're telling you the big left tail risk that everybody fears of rates spiking up to 6% because everybody's dumping bonds is never going to happen.
Such a great point, Raoul. And how comforting is it to you to have a guy that lived his career at the Quantum Fund in charge of the treasury rather than a lifetime academic? Can you just riff on that for a moment?
So I've known Scott for 20 years, maybe longer.
Brilliant.
So I remember going to see him at Soros in London when I was at Goldman. So I've known him since, I guess, 1996, 7, whatever it was.
Wow.
He was a Global Macro Investor subscriber for a long time. He came to my house in Spain. So cool. I've known him for a long time. I've not been in touch with him for a few years now. Last time I saw him was at Carl Bass's wedding. But Scott knows his shit. I don't think he was the world's best fund manager, but he knows how the world works.
Yeah.
He knows what levers you have to pull. He understands markets. He understands what tail risks he needs to remove and when. He kind of understands all of the market psychology stuff. This is the first time we've had a macro guy at the head of the Treasury. We had Rubin before, but he wasn't a macro guy. He was an ARB guy.
Right. That's right. It's a great point. And I think what I like about it the best, Raoul, is that he, he's a guy that can anticipate what markets are going to do, right? When they roll out a statement, or at least he can give President Trump some kind of an inclination like, hey, just so you know, if we do this, markets are going to do this. And he knows. And so they just have a leg up on managing things better.
Yeah, and he can see the signals when they happen in real time. He's like, that's not working. You could see that when the bond market started saying, we don't like this, he very quickly came in. And then he very quickly talks the language of markets. It's like, he didn't say, we're going to calm everything. He's like, the VIX looks like it's peaked.
Yeah.
Like a true macro guy.
Yeah, Raoul, those things jump out at you, right? Like they jump out at me. And then the president says, well, but you better buy the stock market 2 days ago. And he sends Bessent out on, literally what I call the VIX melting tour, because he'll just go out there and say, we're negotiating with these people. We're negotiating with these people because negotiating means buy stocks, right? Tariff wars means VIX at 50, and negotiating means the VIX at 50 is in the rearview mirror, pal.
That's right. But I do think that he's going to have to go back and fix the bond market for the reasons being. I mean, he's a macro guy. He can see, like us, that the bond market is not functioning the way that it should do. He will have some insights from that, from the Treasury themselves, to figure out, okay, what is it that we need to do? And don't forget, when he came in, he said very clearly, I have 3 things I need to do. Lower the dollar, lower rates, lower oil. Those are the financial conditions of global GMI financial conditions. He's saying, I'm going to lower financial conditions. Nobody listens.
Yep.
He's telling you we're going to have a rip-roaring rally. Gold takes off based on exactly what he's saying. The only one he hasn't managed to achieve is rates yet. Yeah. So he will come back and sort that one out, I think.
I literally told my subscribers, Raoul, that you should write a note, a Post-it, and put it on your computer and say, but Trump wants lower dollar, lower rates, lower oil. You know what I mean? That was just me like trying to not allow myself to get long oil or to fade. You know what I mean? Like, just don't fade those trades. If this is what they want, they are in power now and they're going to get it. So come hell or high water, we're almost there.
That's why a lot of people don't understand Trump. Trump generally says what he means.
Yeah.
And then covers it with a bunch of bullshit. But he tells you what he's trying to do, which is like, I'm going to bring the Chinese to the negotiating table and we will get some decent tariffs. Then you get all the Trump bullshit, which is like a gazillion % and we're going to do this. But he's told you what he's going to do. And people always ignore it because of all of the stuff that goes around it. But he usually tells you pretty clearly what it is.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that it was, I think that he was making an attempt to get all of the bad out, with the beginning of the tariff discussion. And it could have gone a lot better. Obviously there's ways to play it. But to me, it seemed like he was like, I'm just going to confuse the world. We're going to get all the bad out. We're going to get everybody to sell their stocks and then we're going to fix it. And this is what he's doing. And that's what happened. So if you played it like that and you know him and you say, yeah, like these guys aren't as clever as the world thinks they are, you kind of have you have a kind of leg up there. I got to ask you about something else, Raoul, that bothers me about, and I'm going back to crypto again, but that's okay. You're the expert that I need for this. Michael Saylor. How is that going to turn out? And what are your thoughts on him? You guys are both very big crypto proponents, and he is like the next level lunatic out there that I can barely understand. How do we look at him?
I'm not sure I want to answer this. The answer is, I don't know.
Fair.
He's either a genius or the opposite,
right?
Or a mad or a lunatic.
Yeah.
What he's doing with MicroStrategies, I don't think there's anything like free money. I don't think it exists. What are the risks that he's putting in the company? I don't know. It's complex, right? Because of these convertible notes and then these. However, the debt's backed by Bitcoin. It's all a bit weird. It's too much for me. I steer well clear of it. Okay. The other thing for you to think about, because this is, again, something of our past, going back to 1998, the biggest client of the street was long-term capital. Mm-hmm. Now, long-term capital, when they went bust, what they exposed was all the leverage that had come off the back of them. Right? Every prime broking desk blew up. Mm-hmm. Here we've got one counterpart that's creating leverage. Now let's assume that they run their leverage okay. But you've got all of the people doing the MicroStrategies convert arb. There's the MicroStrategies NAV trade versus Bitcoin. There's the Bitcoin spot versus Bitcoin perps, Bitcoin spot versus Bitcoin futures. All of this is leverage. Now, what's interesting is for the first time, last time it all blew up was because it was in the hands of Three Arrows Capital, which was one counterpart, which was like long-term capital, blew up everybody because nobody realized there was one borrower in the whole market. This time around, the borrowers are more professional because it's Citadel, it's Millennium, it's the big multi-strat funds.
So they're going through a risk management process alongside the just borrowing willy-nilly.
Yeah, but if Saylor keeps going, it's going to push this out to others. And it's the others who are likely to blow up because, Millennium, they kind of know how to run their risk.
Yeah.
But it's so I'm always nervous of seeing leverage build up in a 70 vol asset. That is my rule of thumb is leverage in a 70 vol asset is going to nuke everybody at some point. Simple rule of thumb.
Yep. That's for sure. That's a good way of looking at it. Okay. I love that you said you don't really know because he is an enigma out there, man. And we're going to I hope I live to find out the outcome of this trade. I really
he's either going to end up hilariously wealthy and the greatest trade of all time or not, or somewhere in the middle where it feels like it's going to go horribly wrong and he gets through the other side. I don't know. But it's fun to watch. What a time to be alive.
It sure is, man. It sure is. And I'm in the cheap seat spectating. I don't know.
I mean, it's like the Hunt brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, he's cornering a market in an asset.
Yeah. You got to respect it because he's got the biggest balls you've ever seen. And then you've also got there's a level of your brain that fades it because he's got the biggest balls you've ever seen. So it's one of those, man. We'll see. Like I said, I hope I live to find the outcome of that one, but we'll see.
Yeah. I just generally, when I see stuff like this and I don't understand it, I just still stay well clear of it.
Yeah, you're another great example, Raoul, of how great traders have noise cancellation policies and don't let things that create useless conundrums in their head seep into their trading process. And that's very valuable.
And also the other thing I've learned is I see a lot of people, particularly retail investors, saying, well, this is leveraged Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it was my old boss, Noam Gottesman at GLG, just said, listen, if you want to scratch your ear. Don't put your hand around your head to try. I don't overcomplicate a trade. Just do the trade. Buy Bitcoin. And don't do it via MicroStrategy's options, because before you know it, you fuck up the whole thing. And that's been a great lesson to me. And we all know them. There's a whole bunch of guys who love structuring complicated positions.
Yeah.
Those guys never make money. They never make money. They sound really smart. They never make money.
God, you took the words right out of my mouth. And that's along the lines of the kind of thing where when you're bullish gold, don't outsmart yourself and buy gold miners, buy gold.
That gold miners trade has been the way to the poorhouse because everyone thinks gold miners, they do that trade and then it always goes wrong.
Same thing. How about all the people piggybacking silver, being long silver because gold's going up, so therefore silver has to. And I'm over here arguing silver's a base metal now, guys. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, if you think gold's going up, just buy gold. But everybody wants to sound smart.
Right. Central banks are buying gold. We want to be in front of them. Let's buy the fucking metal. Anyway. All right, Raoul, look, man, we've covered so much of the macro world, and this has been a great, fast-moving conversation. I want to take us off markets for the close, right, and just do a couple of minutes with you and help our listeners get to know you. Jared and I have put in 46 weeks in a row of the Macro Dirt podcast, and we're so honored that you're able to come on and share our voice with your audience and have some overlap
it took you
there.
47 fucking episodes to invite me.
I know, right? That I'm embarrassed about. That I'm upset about. But you have got a tough schedule too, Raoul. We've tried along the way, but that's fine. But I want to let our audience get to know you a little bit. I've known you for a long time. I was one of the earliest contributors to Real Vision, and I have you to thank for that. You literally helped me launch my career of TG Macro, so I'll always be grateful. And I want to give our audience just a little bit something to chew on to get to know you. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions and I want to hear your reflections. I'm going to ask you three major questions that will help us get to know you. First, who's your hero, Raoul?
That's a difficult question.
You can think about it.
It depends from what angle. But if I think of a figure that inspires me, I'll go with the music analogy and I'll go with David Bowie.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Why so?
Because he was unique as a thinker, as creative. He was very smart. He came from like a council house in Brixton in the UK, but the guy was ahead of everything.
Yeah.
He was ahead of music. He also wasn't scared to change. he adapted, and he also would make sure that he was surrounded by interesting people. So you don't get stuck creating the same old thing. And I found that kind of application of life is really good. If you adapt, surround yourself with new people, new ideas, it just creates something different. And he was also a believer in, experience of life itself is the purpose of life, and go out and experience it all. So yeah, for me, he's just somebody who was incredibly smart, lived in the future, and saw the world in a different way.
Man, that is a beautiful way of looking at David Bowie. That's for sure. I mean, I've got a Bowie bolt tattooed to my arm there because I'm such a believer in the guy, and literally grew up on his vinyl records. So I couldn't agree with you more there that he was some character. Next question, Raoul. What is a major highlight in the life of Raoul Pal?
I think the thing that I probably, after a couple of drinks, tell people about a highlight of mine was I've driven twice in a rally in a Toyota Hilux and a Toyota Land Cruiser from Budapest in Hungary when it was in Celsius, it was minus 18 Celsius, whatever that is, like -5 or something Fahrenheit, and drove 9,500 kilometers down to Mali in Central Africa.
Oh my
and when
God.
I arrived, it was 47 degrees Celsius, which is 115 degrees, in 2 weeks, crossing the Sahara Desert, crossing the Atlas Mountains, the Rift Mountains, the Alps. I went from Hungary to Slovenia, to Italy, to France, to Spain, to Morocco, to Western Sahara, to Mauritania, to Senegal, to Mali. And it was a kind of a GPS coordinate race, but we didn't know what the fuck we were doing. So we were breaking down the Sahara Desert, all of this stuff. But we were also giving out humanitarian aid to small villages in Mauritania and Mali.
Good God. Just when you think you're a worldly guy, Raoul goes and drops that story on you. Jesus Christ. That is unbelievable.
I did it twice. And the second time, I ended up having to have 11 injections in my spine by the Hungarian search and rescue team in a mud hut in Mali because I'd injured my back from being in this bloody Land Cruiser with 3 of us in it. And I couldn't stand up and I couldn't sit down. And they managed to get me into this mud hut. There was this crazy cat woman who was running an NGO in this crossroads town in Mali. And I was helping her out because I met her on the previous rally. And I was helping her out. And I did injure my back. So anyway, my friends who were with me, like true friends, said, we're going to go to the closing party in Bamako. Will you be all right? Come with the rest of the rally. I'm like, thanks, guys. But I said, fine, you go and have the party. Then suddenly these man-mountain Hungarians turn up with needles that long, did 11 injections in my spine until I could stand up, got me back to Bamako where I could fly home.
Dear God, Raoul, is this like a standardized eco challenge race or something? Or is this just something you've gotten together with people to do?
No, it's a friend of mine bought it for me for my 40th birthday, the entry ticket, which, I thought that was very nice and generous of him, but it cost a fucking fortune to desert prepare these cars. But you can actually sell the cars for a profit in Mali because they're so valuable to have, these Land Cruisers and Hiluxes. So, yeah, but it was a lot of fun. It was a professional operation, but they stopped doing it because it was so dangerous. We had to have a military convoy through Mauritania because of the not ISIS, the Al Qaeda in the Maghreb was so dangerous there. In the end, they closed off Mali, Mauritania, and they had to stop doing the rally.
Dear God, man, that is some story. That's some highlight. I agree. Good call, Raoul. I'm glad you told us that story. Last one. What do you find hilarious?
What I find hilarious, there's a lot of things I find hilarious, but the thing that makes me laugh most days is going onto X and just seeing people losing their shit over narratives.
Yeah.
People make stuff up and then they lose their shit. It's hilarious to see. And it becomes this kind of standard accepted thing. Like, well, you saw it with the Liberation Day thing, right? Everyone's like, the world is going to end. The entire global system has changed forever. Nothing's going to work again. And you're just thinking, really? Are you sure?
That is hysterical. That is hysterical. And that's why I say 10 times a day with my phone in my hand, oh my God, I'm never deleting this app. Right. Just to hear the back and forth. Like, I just had a couple of guys arguing in my timeline. And one of the guys just goes, you literally thought Kamala Harris was going to be a good president. Like, you're just like, oh my God, like these people are ruthless. There's a certain code I think that you need to develop on Twitter. There should be some kind of a Navy SEAL award given out to people who don't lose their shit on Twitter. And if you've never lost your shit, you should get like some kind of an emblem so you know who you're talking to. Like, oh, this guy's perfectly sane. He's cool. And if you don't,
we've all lost our shit on Twitter.
That's fair to say. Someone has tweaked us at some level. So, Raoul, look, man, that was a great wrap up. That was literally one of the best conversations we've had in Macro Dirt podcast history. I can't thank you enough for coming on finally. And it was such a free flowing and genuine conversation. I can't wait to get you back on again with my man, JD, and we'll have another one soon and see how we did on some of these calls.
Yeah. Love it, my friend. Really enjoyed it. It's just a whole different way speaking to you because I know how you think. We can speak in ways that we understand because you're not having to explain it. It's fun to do.
It is. And we come from the same background and share so many of the same values and interests and stuff that it's really free flowing. And I guess that's probably why we've been friends for such a long time.
Exactly.
So
I look forward to the next time, my friend.
You're the absolute best, Raoul. Gracefully, and I have to do this for our Macro Dirt podcast process. Hasta la vagina, everybody.